Unit 1, Lesson 5. For Lesson 5, you are rereading the article Loyalists that you read in Lesson 4, and you are coming up with the main idea and supporting details first for each section of the article and then for the entire article as a whole by writing a summary of it. So sections 1 and 2, which are the introduction and the section titled Who Were the Loyalists, those ones you did in class. The last section is the one that you're going to do on your own. So for this video, we'll quickly review section titled Introduction and the section titled Who Were the Loyalists, and then we will review the main idea statement and the summary to make sure that you have all the pieces that you need to be finished for today. Make sure you've filled in all the information in the red boxes up on the screen. Make sure you filled those out in your workbook on pages 22 and 23. The Loyalists were colonists who stayed loyal to Britain and King George III during the American Revolution. They were against American independence. There were about 500,000 Loyalists when the American Revolution started in 1775. That was about 16% of the total population. Loyalists, also known as Tories, lived in all the colonies. They were strongest in the South, especially Georgia and South Carolina. Many also lived in the mid-Atlantic colonies. New York had at least 3 times as many Loyalists as any other colony. Who were the Loyalists? Many important and powerful people were Loyalists. Thomas Hutchinson was a famous historian and governor of Massachusetts. John Copley of Massachusetts was a famous painter. Peter Harrison of Rhode Island was the greatest architect of the time. Some Loyalists, like Joseph Galloway of Pennsylvania, did not like Britain's harsh treatment of the colonies, but they remained loyal to Britain. They did not want to break away from their country. Even Benjamin Franklin's son William was a Loyalist. He was the colonial governor of New Jersey. His father urged him to join the Patriot cause, but he refused. The Patriots put William in jail in 1776. He was released in 1778 and went to New York City, which was occupied by British forces. There he became head of the Board of Associated Loyalists. The board helped direct Loyalist military activities. William Franklin left New York for Britain in 1782 and never returned. Most colonists who worked for Britain as crown officials were Loyalists, but Loyalists came from other groups as well. Rich people and poor people joined the Loyalist ranks. They were bakers and bankers, farmers and sailors. Every religious group had its share of Loyalists, too. Their ancestries were English, Irish, Welsh, Scottish, German, and Dutch. Some black slaves joined the Loyalist cause. They had been offered freedom by the Loyalist leaders. But there were far more American Indians who sided with Britain. Joseph Brant, the leader of the Mohawks, remained loyal to Britain. So did some of the other leaders of the Iroquois Confederacy. Brant was even made a captain in the British Army. In 1777 and 1778, he led Indian forces against American settlements in New York and Pennsylvania. The Patriots fought hard for their cause during the Revolution. The Loyalists did too. Some were spies, some served in the regular British Army, others fought in militias. About 19,000 men fought in more than 40 Loyalist unions. The largest of these was Cortlandt Skinner's New Jersey Volunteers. Many Loyalists flee. The Patriots believed the Loyalists were a serious threat to the Revolution. In January 1776, before the Declaration of Independence, the Second Continental Congress resolved that some Loyalists ought to be disarmed and the more dangerous of them kept in safe custody. After independence on July 4, 1776, some states passed laws to control the Loyalists. Their home and property were taken away. They were beaten, tarred, and feathered, and sometimes killed. This caused thousands of Loyalists to flee. During much of the American Revolution, the British Army occupied New York City. Loyalists fleeing other states gathered there. By the end of the American Revolution in 1783, about 100,000 Loyalists had fled to other countries. Some went to Britain, others to British colonies in Florida and the Caribbean. At least half of the Loyalists went to Canada. They moved into the province of Nova Scotia, and they settled on lands that would become the provinces of New Brunswick and Ontario. Most Loyalists, however, stayed in the United States. And after the peace treaty was signed in 1783, some Loyalists who had fled returned to the United States. Mohawk chief Joseph Brant was not one of them. He fled to Canada with thousands of Mohawks and other Native Americans. The British government gave him a large area of land in what is now Ontario. Loyalists did not support American independence, but they were an important part of American history. The British called the American Revolution a rebellion. The Patriots called it a war for independence. The Loyalists made the war into a civil war. Okay, we're going to quickly review the main idea and supporting details that were identified for the introduction of the article Loyalists. For the main idea, you should have something similar to Loyalists were a small group of people that lived throughout the colony and stayed loyal to Great Britain. And you'll notice in the article that is very similar to the first sentence of the article. That's a great place to look if you're not quite sure where to begin with main idea. It isn't always the first sentence, but that is sometimes where you can get a pretty big clue as to what the main idea is. And you notice that I've underlined that in yellow, and I've put the main idea inside the yellow box in the graphic organizer. Alright, let's take a look at the supporting details that have been identified. Of course, the supporting details tell us more about the main idea. We should have underlined that they were against American independence. There were about 500,000 Loyalists. That was about 16%. Loyalists, also known as Tories, lived in all the colonies, and New York had at least 3 times as many Loyalists as any other colony. So we've identified those in the article. Make sure they're in the graphic organizer. You can use the bullets to help you put those into the organizer. You can pause the video right now if you need more time to fill out your graphic organizer. In the next section of the text Loyalists, titled Who Were the Loyalists, we read all about the different people who made up the group that we call the Loyalists. For this one, we noted that the main idea was that many different people were Loyalists, and the details in the text that support that were the following. Benjamin Franklin's son, William Franklin, was a Loyalist. Many people who worked for British people were Loyalists. Loyalists came from many different groups. Some black slaves joined the Loyalist cause, and many American Indians were Loyalists. All of these supporting details helped us come up with the main idea that many different people were Loyalists. If you notice, that is very, very similar to the first sentence of this section that says many important and powerful people were Loyalists. A lot of times, main idea can be found in the first or last sentences of a paragraph or of a section or of an entire text. That's a common place to look for the main idea statement. The title also helps, so when you think about the title of this section, Who Were the Loyalists, you can answer that question and with the main idea saying many different people were Loyalists. Make sure that you have completed your graphic organizer in your workbook, and also make sure you're underlining these important details in your text that's also found in your purple workbook. It's okay if you had underlined other details that you thought were important. Maybe you can just put a box around these ones that we've highlighted here, just so that you know which details were the most important to the main idea. You can pause the video right now if you need more time to fill out your graphic organizer. Okay, here we are in the last section of the article titled Loyalists. This section of the article is called Many Loyalists Flee, and we're going to reread the article. We're going to look for main idea statements. We're going to think about what the text is mostly about, and then we're going to look for details that help support the main idea that we come up with. Many Loyalists flee. The Patriots believed the Loyalists were a serious threat to the Revolution. In January 1776, before the Declaration of Independence, the Second Continental Congress resolved that some Loyalists ought to be disarmed and the more dangerous of them kept in safe custody. After independence on July 4, 1776, some states passed laws to control the Loyalists. Their home and property were taken away. They were beaten, tarred, and feathered, and sometimes killed. This caused thousands of Loyalists to flee. During much of the American Revolution, the British Army occupied New York City. Loyalists fleeing other states gathered there. By the end of the American Revolution in 1783, about 100,000 Loyalists had fled to other countries. Some went to Britain, others to British colonies in Florida and the Caribbean. At least half of the Loyalists went to Canada. They moved into the province of Nova Scotia, and they settled on lands that would become the provinces of New Brunswick and Ontario. Most Loyalists, however, stayed in the United States. And after the peace treaty was signed in 1783, some Loyalists who had fled returned to the United States. Mohawk chief Joseph Brant was not one of them. He fled to Canada with thousands of Mohawks and other Native Americans. The British government gave him a large area of land in what is now Ontario. Loyalists did not support American independence, but they were an important part of American history. The British called the American Revolution a rebellion. The Patriots called it a war for independence. The Loyalists made the war into a civil war. After rereading the section, it's helpful to remind ourselves that main idea is the most important part of a story, or in this case, the most important part of a section. What is the section mostly about? Look at the title. The title of the section is Many Loyalists Flee. I know that flee means to leave. So I know that the title of this section is Many Loyalists Leave. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, well, where do they leave? Why did they leave? Okay, I don't see any pictures, so I can't look at those. But the main idea, it can also be stated in the first or last sentence. So let's take a look at the first sentence. It says, the Patriots believed the Loyalists were a serious threat to the Revolution. That could be part of why many Loyalists flee. And so when we look at the title, we can start to think about, okay, well, why are they leaving? Where did they go? All sorts of questions come to mind when you hear that title. Then I'm going to be looking for any clue words that are used repeatedly that might help me when I'm trying to identify the main idea. So I have that first sentence underlined, and now I'm thinking to myself, why did many Loyalists flee? And so I'm looking for other details, such as their homes and property were taken away. That's in the first paragraph. Also, it says that they were beaten, tarred, feathered, and sometimes killed. Those are reasons why I would want to leave a place. Then it tells us that in the second paragraph, it tells us that 100,000 Loyalists had fled to other countries. That's information that is directly related to the title. They are fleeing, or they are leaving to other countries. It says most Loyalists, however, stayed in the United States. So remember from earlier, we found out that there were about 500,000 Loyalists in the country. It says 100,000 of them fled. That meant at least 400,000 of them were still in the United States. So definitely I agree that most Loyalists stayed in the United States, even though these things were happening to them. And then finally, we learn about one such Loyalist who is very important. It says the Mohawk chief Joseph Brant was not one of them. He fled to Canada with thousands of Mohawks. Alright, so I've got lots of details underlined here. I've got something that I think could help me figure out the main idea. That's underlined in yellow. The rest are underlined in blue. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out my main idea and supporting details graphic organizer. And I'd like you to do the same. And you're going to do that on your own now that we have underlined those details together. You can pause the video right now if you need more time to fill out your graphic organizer. Alright, now that you have completed your independent piece, we're going to go ahead and think about the article as a whole. We need to write a main idea statement. It says below, record the main idea of the entire text. What was the text about overall? So you ask yourself, what is the whole text about? So I've included up here the 3 main ideas that we came up with for each section. And if we think about them as a whole, it says Loyalists were a small group of people that lived throughout the colony. They stayed loyal to Great Britain. Many different people made up that group of Loyalists. And then the Patriots, they believed the Loyalists were a serious threat to the Revolution. So when I think about all of those things as a whole, I want to make all of that into one sentence, okay? And so I want to think about, okay, well, when was all this happening? It was during the Revolutionary War. There were many colonists, and they were called Loyalists. They thought America should remain part of Great Britain. Now, I know that this main idea statement is going to be part of my bigger summary statement, which is coming up next. So I'm going to leave right there, because what I'm going to do in the summary is I'm going to include many of the details that we've pulled out of the text to help support my summary. So we'll just start off with the main idea statement as, during the Revolutionary War, there were many colonists called Loyalists who thought America should remain part of Great Britain. You can pause the video right now if you need more time to fill out your graphic organizer. Okay, our last task for lesson 5 is going to make sure that we have our summary written. You'll see on the left-hand side I have all the main idea and details that we've already identified for each section of the article Loyalists. Then over here on the right you'll see a page out of your workbook where we've already written the main idea statement, which is, during the Revolutionary War, there were many colonists called Loyalists who thought America should remain part of Britain. You'll see that that is the first sentence of your summary as well, so go ahead and fill that out in your workbook now if you've not yet done so. Alright, now that we have the first sentence of our summary, we're going to use the information on the left-hand side to help build the rest of the summary. So we want to make sure to include a lot of the information, but it doesn't have to include all of the information, just what we think is the most important. So let me start by rereading that first sentence. During the Revolutionary War, there were many colonists called Loyalists who thought America should remain part of Britain. Alright, I'm taking a look over on the left-hand side, and I'm going to see if there's anything more I need to say about that. So I'm looking in the first part about the introduction. It tells me a little bit about where they lived, so I might include that. So I'm going to say for my next sentence, Loyalists lived blank, but the greatest number lived in blank. And I want you to fill in those blanks with the information that you see on the side. Okay, the next sentence can come from our next section, which is who were the Loyalists. So I'm going to take a look over there, and I see that the main idea is that many different people were Loyalists. So I'm actually going to make that my next sentence. So if you see over here in the summary, I've written many different blank. You can fill in the blank there. And then I'm going to look in the blue section underneath that main idea, and it tells me about some of the different Loyalists. Some were certain people, some were other people, and so I'm going to fill that in next. In my summary, some were blank and some were blank. Alright, and we're going to go ahead and I'm going to have you fill in that section now. And then we'll go ahead for the next sentence. We'll take a look at the third section, which was titled Many Loyalists Flee. And on that one, we can take a look at we should include the main idea from that section, that Patriots believed the Loyalists were a serious threat to the Revolution. So you can go ahead and fill that in on the summary. And it tells us, there's another space there. It says, so many Loyalists decided to blank, and you can add that in. And then our closing sentence will come in at the end, and I'll go ahead and give you that one. That one sort of just wraps up the sentence. It wraps up the article. It says, in the end, they fought for what they believed in, and they were an important part of American history. And of course, the they in that sentence refers to the Loyalists. Alright, you're all done with your summary and you are completely done with lesson 5. Great job. You can pause the video right now if you need more time to fill out your graphic organizer.